Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We've had a little bit of a sort of this unintended hiatus. It seems like every Wednesday I've been traveling for one reason or another, and I really like to do this show live, so I didn't want to pre-record anything, didn't want to do anything on a different day. It's 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time live on Wednesdays, and if we can't do it live, we're just not going to do it. But we are here live this Wednesday here at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our really only like our second episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey this year. So excited to be back, and hopefully we will keep this thing rolling going forward. We have quite a bit to talk about today, and as always, if you are here watching live, first of all, thank you. Second of all, don't be afraid to hop in the chat, ask any questions that you may have about college basketball in general, and I will get those answered throughout the show. I like to make this as interactive as possible, but I do have a few things I want to get to as well. Beginning with last night's Jimmy V Classic, always a fun early season event to watch. Obviously takes place at Madison Square Garden. Usually features some very good teams. Last night we had Tennessee, who is now the new number one team in college basketball. Tennessee took on Miami, Florida, followed by number 14 Michigan against Arkansas. We'll start with the first game. The Tennessee Volunteers, like I said, new to the number one spot in college basketball. It wasn't the cleanest game that Tennessee has played all season long, but they did. They took care of business. They beat Miami 75-62. But they just continue to lock people up defensively, and then they continue to shoot the ball really well from three-point range. And that's a pretty darn good combination when you put those two things together. And Tennessee right now has the number 2 adjusted defensive efficiency per KenPom, but they're also shooting 37.7% from three-point range, led by Chaz Lanier, who is shooting 48.6%. To this point, he's arguably been the best transfer in college basketball. Obviously, last year, Dalton Connect was probably the best transfer in college basketball. Now they got Chaz Lanier. I think on this show, certainly on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Podcast, I've talked about how you always know what you're going to get from Coach Rick Barnes and this Volunteers team on the defensive end. But I thought the question was, I don't think anybody expected Chaz Lanier to be Dalton Connect, and he's probably still not. But wherever he landed on that spectrum was going to decide just how good this Tennessee Volunteers team was. Well, so far he's been so darn good that he has almost been Dalton Connect, and that has led them to be the number one team in all of college basketball to this point. And that certainly remained true last night. He hit 2 threes like right out of the gate. He was 4 of 7 from deep overall, scored 22 points. He has been outstanding. Then you get, just the normal point guard play from Zakai Ziegler, 13 points, 9 assists from him. Igor Milic continues to be very good as well. He had 16 points and 9 rebounds. The Charlotte transfer, who gives them an interior presence. And then especially with Meshack and Ziegler, just defensively, this team on the perimeter is so darn good. Travis, in the comments, didn't they lose a bunch of players last year too? I assume you're talking about Tennessee. They lost Dalton Connect. Aside from that, they lost Jonas Adu, their starting 5-man, who actually transferred to Arkansas. Josiah Jordan James, Santiago Vescovi. So, those were all starters too, and guys that had played for them for a while. So, yeah, this is a roster made up of some new names there in Knoxville. And here they are, like I said, number one in the AP poll this week, and now off to a 9-0 start. But a lot of that is because Chaz Lanier has been one of the best players in college basketball. And yeah, absolutely. Coach Barnes, he just delivers it year in and year out. Still kind of searching for that postseason success, but as you and I know, that can be pretty fleeting. That can, there's a lot of reasons sometimes why people struggle to even make second weekends, let alone Final Fours and national championships. It's hard to only measure success, especially in the college game, off of those metrics. So, continue to be very impressed with Tennessee so far. We know the SEC is going to be a gauntlet. They're actually at Illinois on Saturday as well, so they have another tough test there, and then followed by 3 more non-conference games heading in to SEC play. So going to continue to be fascinating to watch Chaz Lanier and this Volunteers team. On the Miami side, it's crazy, man, what this Hurricanes team has been like these last 2 years. Last year down the stretch, I believe they lost their last 10 games. I think they were literally 15-7 to start February and then lost them all from that point on. This year, I just assumed things were going to have to go better. Nigel Pack was back. I really liked the freshman Austin Schwartz that they brought in, from the transfer portal. Well, they had Matthew Cleveland back as well, Lynn Kidd, Brandon Johnson. These guys they added to the front court that were going to be great complementary pieces to their talent in the backcourt. They started the season 3-0, playing mostly nobodies. Now they've lost 7 straight. Now a lot of those are to pretty darn good teams, but they also lost to Charleston Southern at home during that stretch, and they've just really struggled to shoot the ball. They're 32.3% from 3. They're honestly atrocious defensively, and Coach Larinaga, this is year 2 now where it just hasn't been there. I think that he's obviously a long time veteran, successful head coach, but if this season continues to trend in this direction, I have to think that it could be the end of his tenure at Miami. Going on to the second game of the night, Michigan and Arkansas. This was, I don't even know if it's right to call it a tale of 2 halves. It was like a tale of the first, 12 minutes, and then a tale of the middle 20, and then a tale of the final 8 or whatever. Michigan led 36-21 with about 6.5 minutes to go in this game. Then I think it got down to, what was it, 4 or 6 at the half. And then Arkansas leads by 18 with 9 minutes to go in the game. Michigan then comes all the way back. I think they cut it. Yeah, they cut it to 1 after a couple straight. They would make the first free throw, miss the second, offensive rebound, the free throw miss, get it back up, get back to the foul line or score, whatever it was. And then I forget the exact timing, but we're talking under a minute to go. Brazil goes to the line for Arkansas, down or up 1, misses both. Michigan comes down. Brazil gets an amazing block. I think it was on a Vlad Golden hook shot. I mean, it might have been Danny Wolf. I can't remember, but one of those 2 guys shoots a hook shot. Brazil just gets vertical, shows off his impressive leaping ability, his length, blocks the shot, gets fouled, but then still only makes 1 of 2. He missed 3 of his last 4 free throws, under 20 seconds to go, but that block ended up being the difference. Michigan couldn't score on the final possession to tie it up or win the game. Arkansas escaped with an 89-87 victory. Obviously, it's hard to have this stuff behind you. It's hard to wear this and talk about Arkansas because people are immediately going to say that I'm a hater or everything's kind of taken as some shade towards Coach Calipari, Arkansas. Anytime you talk about them as a Kentucky fan, that's not meant to be the case here. I've just been very disappointed with the John L. Davis transition to Arkansas this season. Adu Fierro has been outstanding. He's been outstanding this year. Boogie Fland, one of my favorite freshmen coming into college basketball this year, he's been pretty darn good for them. But I said it on Twitter at halftime. Until John L. Davis is the best player on this Arkansas team, I do think that they have a ceiling. I don't know how good they can be unless John L. Davis is their best player because this is a guy who's been an All-American in the past. He's gone to a Final Four. He needs to be the guy. As good as Boogie Fland has been, especially as good as Adu Fierro has been, I just don't know if they are the guys to take you where you want to go if you're a Razorbacks fan or Coach Calipari. Now, in the second half, you got the best of the best from DJ Wagner. He was excellent. I thought Carter Knox played a very good game. Certainly Trevin Brazile, who I already talked about, he played well in this one. But John L. Davis, 6 points, 2 of 8 shooting. I don't really know what's happening with him. And I've watched a handful of Arkansas games, Certainly haven't watched all of them. I don't watch the film like I did when they were all at Kentucky. So I probably watched 3 or 4 of the games, and it just seems like he's out of the flow. I don't really understand what's going on there. And maybe because the other guys are playing well, they don't feel like they need to kind of force him into a specific role. But like I said, I just think that once you get into SEC play, and certainly the postseason, if it's not going through John L. Davis, I just don't know if this can be a top 4 SEC team, a top 20 national team. I'm not sure if I see that, but I do think that they certainly are supremely talented. And as they continue to get healthy, I think you're going to continue to see more and more good things from Arkansas. Travis says, "Call you LeBron with the play-by-play remembrance." What it helped when I was finally able to sit down after going to a high school game last night. I was finally able to sit down and focus on the last, like the second half of that game, and it was certainly a memorable one down the stretch. All right, so that's kind of the recap of last night's Jimmy V Classic. Again, you had Tennessee and Arkansas pulling out wins, two good games and intriguing matchups last night. I do want to talk a little bit about Kentucky. I've had some. I talked more in depth about the Kentucky Gonzaga game on Monday's episode of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, but just some big picture thoughts on the Cats to this point. One of the things that I think you really want to see with 4 more games before SEC play, you've got to see Kentucky start to shoot the ball better. Now, I'm on the record. I've said that the last thing I'm going to worry about with this Kentucky team is their shooting ability. It's going to take, Kentucky hasn't shot it well 4 straight games, under 10 made threes, under 30% shooting from beyond the arc. If these next 4 games are just like that, then the alarm bells might start to go off just a little bit. But we're certainly not there yet because there is a ton of variance when it comes to 3-point shooting. Just honestly, like you've seen it on the defensive end a little bit. Opponents are shooting 25.3% from 3 against Kentucky. That's 4th best defensive 3-point percentage in the country. Now, do I think a lot of that has to do with excellent scouting, excellent execution of game plan, and just good all-around defense? Absolutely. Is some of it the level of play of some of these non-conference teams? Yeah, that's certainly some of it as well. But, I don't think the teams are going to continue to shoot 25% from 3. There's some variance to that. Just like I don't think this team's going to shoot 35.9% from 3 the rest of the year, even on this sort of volume. Somebody asked me about it on Twitter at BRamseyKSR yesterday and asked about, my concerns and my thoughts on Kentucky's 3-point shooting. I went back and looked at last season. Kentucky on a percentage basis was the best 3-point shooting team in college basketball. Shot 40.9%. I believe. Certainly higher volume this year, which makes you, very much okay with a lower percentage. But I think last year there were 14 games where Kentucky shot under 33.3% from 3. And that was when they were the best percentage-wise 3-point shooting team in the country. So there's just always going to be a lot of variance. You normally don't get to shooting, 38% from 3 or something that I kind of think is a reasonable range for this Kentucky team, 37.5 to 39%. You don't get that by shooting that every night. You get that from going, 13 of 26 one night, 4 of 25 the next night, 10 of 30 one night. You're going to see it fluctuate much more. And that's just the way that it goes. And I think that hopefully tonight, as you're watching this, Kentucky plays Colgate tonight. Colgate, A, is not very good at basketball. B, their defense stinks. C, they're one of the worst teams at defending the 3-point line in all of college basketball. It's a perfect get-right opportunity for the Cats before they go play. They play Louisville at Rupp Arena on Saturday. They go to Madison Square Garden and play at Ohio State the following Saturday. Then they play Brown. Then they are into the SEC schedule. So I do want to see them improve from 3-point range in that time period. Travis says, and that's why when you lose, when you shouldn't, and win when you shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I talked about that. It really is sometimes it's a make or miss game, and I talked about that in the kind of dichotomy between the Clemson game and the Gonzaga game. Clemson had a guy make his 4th 3-point shot in 125 college basketball games. Clemson had a guy bank in a 3 at the end of the shot clock. Clemson had their 5-man who essentially doesn't shoot threes. He made a 3-point shot. Well, that's how, especially when you're at Clemson, that's how Clemson wins that game. That's how they keep Kentucky from coming back in the second half. Now, flip that to playing Gonzaga in the second half. Gonzaga goes 0 of 9 from 3-point range. They also missed the front end of 2 1-and-1s when they're one of the best free throw shooting teams in college basketball. So sometimes it really is that simple. Like, nerds like me can sit here and watch the film and talk about the ball screen coverages, and we can all, give Coach Pope his flowers for switching to 1-3-1 and all this kind of stuff, when sometimes it comes into, did Clemson bake in the 3, or did Gonzaga miss the front end of 2 1-and-1s? Like, sometimes it really is that simple, especially it feels like in college basketball. Sometimes it's just makes and misses. And you've seen some of that just in these last couple of games from Kentucky, but definitely looking for them to get hot here in a stretch from 3-point range. And then obviously the other biggest storyline for Kentucky right now is the health of the point guard position. You lose Kirk Risa for, it sounds like about 3 to 6 weeks. Just as you were, Lamont Butler didn't play in that Gonzaga game, then you lose your backup point guard. So will Lamont Butler play tonight? I don't think it's super important. I would like to see him get, 8 or 10 minutes just to make sure he's good to go for Louisville, but certainly his health against Louisville and Ohio State, and then even, more so going into the SEC schedule, that's much more important than whether he can play or not against Colgate. Um, I think we could have Travis here in the chat. He could run point guard tonight, probably be okay against Colgate. But I think you are going to see, certainly in the games against Colgate and Brown, you're going to see some Travis Perry minutes. But we also saw Jackson Robinson step in and play like the final, 8 minutes of regulation and 5 minutes of overtime. He was essentially running the point. And I've said too, some of it just becomes semantics about talking about the point guard position, especially with this Kentucky offense. Like, I've already kind of, made fun of it and gotten mad about it a couple times. But like, think about the number of times that Amari Williams ends up dribbling the ball up the court. Like, unless you're facing pressure, who dribbles the ball up the court? That's essentially the only time that you're the point guard. And then once you're into offense, it becomes relatively meaningless. So I'm not overly concerned about having to play Jackson Robinson some extended minutes at the point guard spot. That concerns me less than having to throw Travis Perry in there. From everything I've seen so far, I'm not sure he's ready. But this team has shown a great ability to figure things out, and especially figure things out on the fly. So that's going to certainly be something to watch over these next 4 games, as well as how do they piece together the point guard minutes without Kirk Risa, and then potentially without Lamont Butler still, if he is not able to give it a go. Other thing I want to talk about, we're coming up on one of the best Saturdays of the college basketball season. That probably gets thrown around too often, and I'm probably doing it here again as well. But, certainly of the non-conference slate, this is going to be one of the best Saturdays that we get. We have Gonzaga and UConn at Madison Square Garden on Saturday. I'm just going down the list on KenPom here. You have Tennessee, who I already mentioned. They're at Illinois on Saturday. Marquette is at Dayton. UCLA plays Arizona on a neutral floor in Phoenix. Texas A&M plays Purdue. I think that one's in that one's in Indianapolis. St. Mary's, Boise State. Auburn, Ohio State in Atlanta. Wisconsin, Butler in Indianapolis. That's a back-to-back with that Purdue game. Florida plays Arizona State. Arizona State's a team that's been much better than we kind of thought when everybody watched that exhibition game at Cameron Indoor Stadium when they got their doors blown off. Memphis is at Clemson. Creighton is at Alabama. So there's going to be a lot of really fun basketball to watch throughout the day on Saturday. So make sure you are locked in for all of that. I don't think there's a whole lot else to discuss here today. I am going to, let's just throw in my 3 best bets for today. This year I've been putting more of my bets over on KS Board. I'm not going to say unfortunately it helps pay my bills, but that is behind a paywall, and I've just been doing that to kind of give some value to those who subscribe to KSR Plus, but usually about once a week or so at least. I'm putting those out on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, as well. And then additionally, I've started to get more and more messages for people asking for them. If you DM me, I'm always going to give them to you. But I've already had some people reach out, so I'll probably start putting them on Twitter more and more often. I think right now on the season, for in the interest of transparency, I am 77 and 69. So it was a really tough start, and we've been pretty darn hot over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But here are my three best bets for tonight. I'm taking Norfolk State plus 25.5 against Baylor. I think that's way too many points. Ken Pom had it at 18. This Baylor team has kind of beaten the crap out of the lesser teams that they've played, but Norfolk State has played some good teams well. Also, both of these teams played at a relatively slow pace. So I think it's going to be pretty hard for Baylor to win this. Like I think this was going to be more of like a 16 to 20 point game, not a 25 to 30 point game. Also taking the points with UTEP plus 15.5 against Louisville. I do think, again, it's hard to say this when you're wearing this and you have all this stuff behind you. I'm not throwing shade, but I think we still have to learn how good this Louisville team really is. The last few games, they've lost 3 straight now. I think that those have all been two good competition: Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Duke. But they've scored 64, 63, and 65 points in those 3 games respectively. It took them overtime to score 79 against West Virginia. I just don't think they're great offensively, shooting 28.2% from 3-point range. And this is a UTEP team that is literally the best in the country at forcing turnovers. They forced turnovers on 28.3% of possessions, while Louisville was 244th in turning it over 18.9% of the time. So I think UTEP's going to turn them over. Also, UTEP's weakness is guarding the 3, but we just talked about Louisville's not very good at making threes. So I think that lines up pretty well. Like Coach Joe Golding in his 4th year at UTEP, I think they're going to be able to do some things defensively to bother Louisville. Give me the points plus 15.5 UTEP against Louisville. And then finishing off, I believe this is a 10 o'clock tip, San Diego State minus 14.5 against Cal Baptist. I think San Diego State might, just be really good, period. But I think they're definitely elite defensively, top 10 Ken Pom defense right now. I think this is one where, like, if they can score 70, 72 points, that they're going to probably hold Cal Baptist in the 50s and be able to cover this number just by getting to the 70 or so. So this one's rolling the dice a little bit more, but it's kind of just my feel out for how good is San Diego State this year. So again, my 3 plays this evening, these are all always single plays, not a parlay. Norfolk State, I should say, plus 25.5. UTEP plus 15.5. San Diego State minus 14.5. Thank you all for being here today. If anybody has any last minute comments, you can sound off in the chat right now. If you have any comments watching this in the future, just drop a comment. I will get back with you. You can also always hit me up on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Again, this has been All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We're going to get back to doing these every Wednesday live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. So please subscribe here. Also, you can catch the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast every Monday and Friday on Spotify. And then again, as always, all my work you can find on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Thank you all for tuning in live. Thank you for anybody who's watching this in the future. And I hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week.